Those that have been watching my channel know that I have a love for Barlow knives, and I wouldn't say I've got a real collection going, but I've bought a few, and I probably will continue to. I don't think what I have is what you'd yet really call a collection. I did have a guy message me the other day, said he had 150 Barlows collection. I'm like, okay, you win. I'm not even going to come close to that number ever. But I love looking for old knives, and every now and then I run across something that's really fascinating, really speaks to me, and that's kind of how I tend to collect things. I tend to collect knives that are, I don't know, that speak to me, that have a history or can, have a life that they've lived, and, that to me is important. I mean, you could collect, and I have some knives that are just pretty run-of-the-mill that, don't really have a lot going on, but they're valuable, but to me, things that actually have a history and a life and kind of speak to me, really to me are more fun to collect. And so sometimes I buy things that other people will be like, why did you buy that? So I did that the other day. So I was looking on eBay and I saw an old Barlow. It's a Camillus, and it was pretty cheap, and it really spoke to me. So I had to buy it, and I got it, and that's this one. That's an old Camillus. You can kind of tell by the way the stamp is done on the bolster. The tang stamp is virtually gone. But if you get a magnifier and look really close, this appears to be made in the 60s or 70s. It's a Model 50, and this thing is just so worn. Look at the blades on this. Now, sometimes you look at a knife and you can tell it's been abused. Especially if the blades are kind of dished out towards the hinge or the pivot, where they've been on an electric knife sharpener, or maybe somebody's used a grinder or something. You can usually tell abuse. But this one really spoke to me in a number of ways. I don't think this was abused. I think somebody just used the dickens out of this. So this originally is a Model 50. I think there's also a Model 51. The 51 has a clip point main blade. The 50 has a spear point, so it would have originally looked something like this one. This is an Imperial. So it originally would have had a blade that looked something similar to that. So you can see there's been a lot of material worn away there. And it's, when you look closely at the wear patterns, the grind, or not grind really, but the sharpening marks on the blade, it looks like somebody used a carborundum stone and sharpened this and used it and sharpened it and used it and sharpened it and used it. And the bolsters are steel, and if you look closely, they're lightly pitted. So this thing's been rusty and been cleaned up, and like I say, the tang stamp, it's virtually gone. You have to get a magnifier and get real close to be able to even see what it says. But you can if you get a magnifier, and like I say, it's a Camillus. It's made in the 60s or 70s. And so it's not super old. It's 50 to 60 years old, But this thing just shows tons of honest wear. If you look at the scales on it, originally it was saw cut pattern, kind of like this, probably Delrin. And the saw cut pattern is all but gone. There's just tiny vestiges of it here and there where you can see. But you can see all the scratches and marks and whatever. This thing either rode around in someone's pocket with their car keys or change, or maybe it rattled around in a toolbox. But this is a knife that somebody picked up every day and used, and then resharpened, and used, and resharpened, and used, and resharpened. And it really speaks to me because I think we've kind of lost something today. I think a lot of, I'm not trying to pick on any generation, but I think a lot of younger people no longer use their hands like we used to. I've made my living my whole life up until recently using tools every day, picking up tools, a screwdriver, a screw gun, knife, wire strippers, all kinds of stuff. I've made my living, and even a lot of my hobbies have involved using tools. For years, for the company I still work for, I installed emergency call systems all over the country, and would go out every day and install things and use tools. And before that, I repaired cameras. I've I've worked in industrial environments where, just my whole life, the use of tools has been a primary thing for me. And I have some tools that I've been using for a long time, and I have a relationship with them. I cherish those tools. They're valuable to me. And I had some automotive tools stolen from me a few years ago. Someone broke into my car and stole them. Foolishly, I left the tool bag in sight on the front floorboard, and overnight, and someone decided they wanted them more than I did. And I've replaced those tools with newer tools, and they work just fine. But somehow I miss those old tools. I mean, it's like I used them for years, and they felt right in my hands, and I don't know. You develop a relationship with these things over time. But I can imagine that there's a person out there, I don't know if it's a man or a woman, doesn't matter, but they picked up this knife every day and they used it. And when it got dull, they sharpened it, and they used it, and they sharpened it. This thing is so worn, you'll like this. So if you close this, the springs on the back, I don't know how well this will show up, you can see the springs are not flush anymore. They're not flush with the liners, they're inset. So this thing has been opened and closed so many times. You notice the blade actually goes a little past full open, and there's no half stop anymore. I mean, just barely feel a half stop there. And there's almost no spring action. There's no walk and talk left. This blade actually will kind of snap open and has a half stop. This one has been open and closed so many times. It's almost, the back side of the blade where the spring rides is probably just almost round. It's just been worn so many times. I mean, it's not really that loose. It's a little loose, but it's just been opened and closed a zillion times. And so, I don't know, this really spoke to me. I think it really talks of a time when people still use their hands, and they took care of them the best they could. Whoever used this, I mean, obviously they didn't have an Arkansas stone, because you can actually see the marks from a coarser stone on the edge. Probably, like I say, a carborundum stone, which, those were real common. I mean, Arkansas stones have been around a long time too, but you can go to the hardware store, any hardware store, get a carborundum stone, one side coarse, one side is fine, and you put oil on it and sharpen. And this thing has been rusty and been cleaned up and been rusty, and so I ordered it on eBay. It came from a location in Florida. And I don't know if somebody used this near the ocean, which Florida has a lot of sea, coastline, or if whoever owned it retired to Florida, and then, it ended up however it got to the eBay seller. But I don't know. I know it's kind of silly, and some would probably laugh at me for buying such a worn-out relic. But there's something about this that just really spoke to me about the hands that used it, the person that used it, the hard work they put in every day, using their hands to make a living. And this knife has lived, I think, an honest, hard-working life. I don't really believe it's been abused. Obviously, no one's put it on a grinder. I think it's just primarily been sharpened so many times that it just got worn to this point. And someone used this thing a lot of times. Anyway, I just thought it was really cool. You compare it to one that's not so worn, and it's just seen a lot of use, a lot of wear and tear. So anyway, to me, it's not valuable. It's probably not worth more than I think I paid like $12 or something like that for it on eBay. It's not really worth anything. But to me, it speaks of a person that used their hands to make a living. And I know Case Knives had a promotion a while back about, let's start using our hands again. I forget what exactly it was called, but it was a few years ago, where they were really promoting people, using their hands again. And I think we need that in this country, well, all over the world. But in America, I think we really need people to start using their hands again, to make a living, even to do hobbies. I mean, I know people that can't they can't fix anything at home. If anything gets broken, they have to call somebody. They're just completely incapable of using their hands and their head. I mean, you got to use both. You don't use your hands without your head. But they're just so unable to use their hands to actually do anything. And it's really sad. Anyway, I won't go on any more about it. I just thought it was an interesting look at something that really spoke to me. And if you have any thoughts or comments on what that kind of means to you, do you have a knife in your collection that shows that kind of wear, or do you have one that maybe you've inherited? I had one kind of like this. It's a Remington that I got from my grandfather that looked very much like this. And he used it, it was much older. He got it back in the 30s when he was working for Sinclair Oil in the oil fields. And it's boxed away. I haven't been able to locate it recently. I was going to look for it, but I haven't been able to locate it. I've got some stuff boxed away that I need to go through. But I know that knife, it's not as worn as this one, but it lived a hard life out in the oil field. Anyway, if you have any thoughts or questions, please don't hesitate to leave me a comment. I always appreciate it when you watch my channel. And as always, thanks for watching.